Zach again, newtutorial.com, coming in, making a video for you today. We're going to continue sweeping away the arguments put forth by Apologia Studios and their overview of the Hebrew roots movement. So let's go ahead and get into our first clip.
And like we know in Galatians, it says that we have died to the law. Why would we try to put in place something that has gone away? You know, why would we try to bring it back?
People will come to me and they'll be like, Zach, let me ask you a question. Have you ever read the book of Galatians? Yes. I have read the book of Galatians. Yes. Shirt given to us by our friends Rick and Christy Jordan. Yes, I have read I love this shirt. Anyway, it's always funny. Yes, I've read the book of Galatians. Let's go ahead and get into the verse, Galatians chapter 2. The verse that Andrew was quoting, starting at verse 19, "For I, through the law, am dead to the law, that I might live unto God. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me, and the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me." Now, usually this is when I bring out this slide, when everyone seems to say, but Paul, and they start throwing verses out of Romans or Galatians. You have to understand this thing. Whenever Paul seems to be speaking against the law, you can place his speech or his writings in one of two categories, okay? The traditions of man, man's law, man's doctrine, or two, the punishment or the curse the law brings when you break it. It's the whole analogy I gave you before. You ran the red light, you got a ticket, the officer gives you a ticket, you go before the court, you pay your fine, and now once the fine has been paid, you're now dead to the law. The law no longer holds dominion over you, because when you got that ticket, when you broke that law, the law was hanging over your head because you were guilty of breaking it. But once you pay the fine, you're free from the law. The law no longer holds dominion over you. You are dead to the law. It's not that hard. It doesn't mean the law is dead. It doesn't mean you get back in your car and run red lights on the way home, because eventually the judge is going to get sick of seeing you. And he's like, hey, listen, the fine has already been paid, but obviously that wasn't enough. You want to pay the fine again. You're breaking the same law that, puts you in front of the judge in the first place. That's just dumb. It's the same way with our Father's law. Once your fine has been paid and you realize, Isaiah 53, that the Messiah took on all the punishment you deserved, you should be grateful. You should be elated that this punishment has been forgiven you. And then try your best to adhere to that law that once found you guilty. It's not that hard. It's easy. Now, when Paul seems to speak against the law, an example of number one is Mark chapter 7, verse 7. The washing of pots, the washing of hands, all these ceremonial things that we find in the Talmud and the Mishnah, man's law, something man made up, and Yeshua, our Messiah, is speaking against man's law. He says, you hold the traditions and doctrines of men over the commandments of God. And Paul also, through his writing, speaks against this as well. So whenever you see Paul seem to speak against the law, you can place it in those two categories: the traditions and doctrines of man, man's law, or the punishment or the curse the law brings when you break it. Going back to that verse, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me, and the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. The fine has been paid, a fine you could not pay. So he paid it for you. And because he paid it for you, you're now free to walk out of that courtroom and be free to be dead from the law. But it doesn't mean you're disobedient. It doesn't mean that when you read that something in your Old Testament is an abomination, you're like, that's just been nailed to the cross. I don't have to deal with that. You realize that two men laying together is the same amount of disgust, holds the same amount of disgust as you eating pork. Because God calls them both an abomination just a couple chapters apart. And one's not ceremonial, one's not moral. There's no such phrase in your Bible, moral law and ceremonial law. They're the same. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever, from everlasting to everlasting. Malachi 3:6, he changes not. What was a sin before is still a sin now. All right, we'll leave it at that. Go home, read your Bible. Thanks.